Flipping through your book, The Seed Farmer, one of the things I thought about are what are common mistakes beginners make? And one of them I could see myself making is not doing enough labeling, especially on something like tomatoes or peppers. You grow a bunch of different varieties or cultivars and you go to save them. Are you labeling it at all stages, not just the plant? But then when you pick the fruit stays labeled, the fruit stays segregated, it goes into the jars stay labeled, the jars stay segregated, then the envelopes do too. Because if you just end up with random seed at the end of the day, odds are you're not telling the difference between one type of tomato seed and another when you're just looking at them on the table. Besides that, what are other things you think people should be aware of that they might not think about?
There are so many mistakes to make. The common ones, and the labeling is a good example. So common might be knowing when the seed is ready, like just seeing seed and then trying to harvest it. Like a lot of seed, you'll see it at an immature stage even before it's ready. So if you had like a brassica seed pod that was green and you open it, you'll see little green seeds in there. They look like seeds, but they're not mature. So you have to make sure that you're giving it long enough time to mature. And most plants will tell you that they're ready. Like a tomato turns bright red and it gets tasty. That's a sign that the seed inside is ready and it's asking an animal to harvest it and then I guess process it through the digestive tract and then plant on the other end. And something like arugula, it turns into like a dry pod. So not being patient enough and waiting for the seed to actually be ready is a big mistake that some people do. Another, and this is probably the biggest thing that I really learned early on, is making sure the crop is dry when you're cleaning the seed and making sure you're doing it on a dry day because all that chaff absorbs moisture so easily from the air, and any extra moisture makes it harder to clean seed. So having a dry day with a dry pile of seed plants makes it so much easier to clean the seed. Another one would be people don't winnow their seed. And so like people have been winnowing seed for 10, 15, 20,000 years. It's like as long as there's been people harvesting seed, they've been using wind in some form to winnow it. And if you've never experienced seed winnowing, it can seem really scary and intimidating to take your gentle little seeds and throw them in the wind and then lose everything. And it's actually easier than you think. Like if you take a box fan and you could put on the lowest settings and you put your seeds in a little container with the chaff and you just pour it in front of the box fan, you'll see there'll be two streams. The heavy seed coming down, even if it's tiny seed, it'll still come in there and then the chaff will blow away. And if you do this over a tarp with like one or two bins, you can also collect. Like let's say you put it on too fast, the fan, and you blow too much stuff away, you can collect on the tarp and then re-winnow it a little bit more gently. But usually people are too gentle and they could be a little bit more aggressive. So winnowing is something that scares people. And I don't know if you call that a beginner mistake, but I think it's a beginner missed opportunity.
Yeah, a little newbie fear or newbie just inexperience. You don't want to mess it up, I think, is what it always goes back to, right?
Yeah. So one of the biggest, another fear that people have, and it's also a potential big mistake, is cross-pollination. So cross-pollination is when two varieties of the same species. So you might have like a yellow tomato and an orange tomato, and they're the same species, so they're genetically compatible, and they could cross-pollinate, and you wind up with something different. And so the first mistake people make is being ultra terrified of cross-pollination, and being worried that if something cross-pollinates, it's really not going to be good. But in most cases, if you have something that cross-pollinates, it is still edible. It's not going to be toxic. It's still something so it's edible. It's probably still tasty in most cases. Like if you have two brassica greens from the Brassica rapa species, like a Mizuna and a Tatsoi, they're the same species and they can cross together. If you harvest it, you might have a bunch of different crossed up greens. So sure, it's not Tatsoi. Sure, it's not Mizuna. If you're selling seed and you want to sell Tatsoi seed, that's a problem. If you're harvesting it for your own use, then you now have a new salad green that can go into a salad mix that nobody else has seen, and or unless somebody's already made that cross. But so it's a unique opportunity to do that. So people are very afraid of cross-pollination, and I don't think they should be. I think that in cross-pollination is an exciting opportunity to see new things, and it's like a unique opportunity that you can have on a market garden when you harvest your own seeds to use your own seeds, as you can see new potential varieties that you could select for.
I love that idea because you're not beholden to anything. If you're just using it for yourself, and even if you're just marketing the end product, the fruit, the leaf, whatever, you can call it whatever you want. Selling this,
Yeah.
like you said, different story, but in this case, yeah, it doesn't matter. One quick question on immaturity. If I have
Yeah.
a tomato that should ripen to red,
Yeah.
and I harvest that tomato when it's green and I get the seed out of it, or I have peas or beans and I get the beans when they're more at the edible stage, is immature seed less viable or is it just non-viable? Like it's not going to go at all.
There's a little bit of a spectrum on that. But I would say, like, if you harvest the seed from a green tomato, it's probably not going to be good. If you harvest like peas or beans at a shelling stage, like especially a fresh shelling stage, when they're very tender, they're probably not going to be good. If they're almost ready, they might be good. Now, if you have a tomato that is starting to turn and you harvest it and you leave it on a counter or a cold room or in an area and it finishes maturing, that seed will still be good. The same way it might not be as tasty as if it was on the vine. Sometimes it is still tasty, but if it was changing color when you harvest it and it finishes changing color off the vine, that seed is still good. So yes, something you could do, like if you're in an area that has hard frosts and you have your hard frost coming, you could go pick anything that's starting to change, bring them into a warm area, let them finish maturing, and you can extract the seed then. If you harvest a green fruit, like a really green fruit, and you leave it on a counter and it does mature eventually, that seed's probably not going to be as good as if the fruit had started to change. And like with peas and beans, if you harvest the plant with the pods on it, like so in our climate, we're like we can have a frost date between like September 18th and like the 1st of November. So the 1st of November is great because we have everything out of the field by then. But September 18th, things haven't quite finished maturing, and I'm always stressed out. So when we see a forecast that it's going to be really cold, we will often preventatively, yeah, like preventatively harvest things to get ahead of that frost. And so if beans are not fully dry down on the pod, but they're fully fleshed out, you can see the defined bean inside, we'll harvest the whole plant, we'll bring it into a greenhouse so it's not exposed to the frost outdoors, and we'll let it sit for another week or 2 weeks, and it will dry down on the plant. So as long as it's almost finished, most seeds will continue ripening on the plant, even if it's pulled out of the ground. It's not 100% true, but it's common enough. Like, it's true enough that I would recommend it in most cases.
Yeah, I love that. Another case where a little bit of knowledge goes a long way and somebody new would never know that. So, thanks for dropping that. And they can get a bunch more out of your book, The Seed Farmer, available on Amazon and everywhere else where books are sold.